There is a version of you sitting somewhere in 2027. And right now, today, you are deciding who that person is going to be. Not with your dreams, not with your intentions, with your actions. The ones you're taking and the ones you keep putting off. Most people think their life is complicated. It isn't. Your circumstances might be complicated. Your life follows a simple chain. What you believe becomes how you feel, becomes what you do, becomes what you get, becomes how you live. Break any link in that chain and you can explain almost anything that's ever happened to you. The debt, the stalled career, the relationships that keep repeating the same pattern. Here's the part nobody wants to hear. If the life you're building right now doesn't look like the one you wanted, that's not bad luck. It's not a rigged system, though the system may in fact be unfair. It's not your family, though your family may have given you a hard start. It's arithmetic. You reap what you sow. And most people have spent years sowing comfort while hoping to harvest greatness. I'm Marcus, and this channel exists for one reason: to help you become the version of yourself that your future self will thank you for, instead of the one they'll resent. If any part of what you just heard landed somewhere real, tell me in the comments where you are right now. I read every one, and I promise you're not as alone in this as it feels. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't motivation. Motivation fades by lunchtime. This is a philosophy, the actual mechanics of how ordinary people rebuild themselves into people they don't recognize. And the most important part of it isn't even the part most people expect. It's not the part about waking up early. It's not the part about discipline. It's something quieter, and it's coming. Most people watch videos like this, one looking for a spark, something to feel fired up about for a day or two before the feeling fades and the old routine quietly reclaims the schedule. That's not what I want to give you. I want to give you something that still works on the mornings you don't feel anything at all. Because those mornings, the flat, uninspired, nothing special Tuesdays, are where an entire life actually gets built or quietly abandoned. Everyone can perform discipline on the days they feel like a main character. The real dividing line is what you do on the days you feel like nothing at all. Most people try to fix their life at the wrong level. They try to change their results by grinding harder at behavior. More hustle, more hours, more willpower. While the actual problem sits underneath, untouched. It's like painting a house with a cracked foundation. It looks better for a season. Then the cracks come back, wider than before. The foundation is philosophy. Not what you say you believe when someone's listening, but what you actually believe when no one is. Ask yourself honestly, what do you believe about money? About your own potential? About whether effort is worth it? Most people have never once interrogated these beliefs. They just inherited them. From a childhood home, a broke relative, a culture that quietly taught them to expect less. Here is the belief that keeps more people stuck than any other. Someone else is responsible for my results. The economy, the boss, the parents who didn't prepare them. And the cruel trick of this belief is that it always contains a grain of truth, which is exactly what makes it so easy to hide inside. Your circumstances can be real and still not be the reason you're stuck. Circumstances are the weather. Philosophy is whether you build a shelter or complain about the rain. Nature runs on one law that people conveniently forget when it comes to their own life. You cannot harvest what you didn't plant. A farmer doesn't wish for a crop. He doesn't visualize corn. He gets up before the sun, turns the soil, plants the seed, and tends it every single day. Long before there's any evidence it's working. There is no harvest without months of invisible labor first. Think about how strange it would sound if a farmer complained that spring wasn't fair to him, while his field sat unplanted since October. We'd call that absurd. And yet we do the exact same thing with our own lives constantly. We expect a harvest from a field we never bothered to plant, and then we call the universe unjust when nothing grows. So here's the question underneath everything else. What are you actually planting day after day? Not what you intend to plant. Not what you'll start planting soon. What are you planting today? Because whatever it is, that's what's coming back to you. And there is no negotiating with a season. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. Most people don't even realize they're planting anything at all. They think they're just getting through the day. But every day is a planting day, whether you notice it or not. The hour you spend scrolling instead of learning. That's a seed. The conversation you avoid instead of having. That's a seed. The workout you skip because you're tired. That's a seed too. Nothing you do is neutral. It's either building the field you want or the field you're stuck in. And here's why this is so hard for most people to see clearly. The beliefs running your life right now weren't chosen. They were absorbed. You picked them up from a dinner table conversation you don't even remember, from a parent's offhand comment about money that's stuck somewhere in the back of your mind, from a teacher who told you at 11 years old that you weren't the academic type. Nobody sat you down and asked whether you agreed with any of it. It just became the operating system running quietly underneath every decision you've made since. This is why so much effort at self-improvement fails. People try to change their behavior without ever going back and auditing the beliefs that behavior is built on. It's like trying to fix a leaking roof by repainting the ceiling. The paint looks good for a week. Then the water comes through again, because nobody actually went up and looked at what was broken. So take an honest inventory. What did you absorb about money growing up? That it's evil, that it's scarce, that people like you don't get much of it. What did you absorb about effort? That hard work is punished, that opportunities go to people with connections you don't have. You don't have to answer out loud, but answer honestly, because every one of those beliefs, examined or not, is currently steering your life, whether you gave it permission to or not. The good news is that a belief you inherited without choosing it can also be replaced without waiting for permission. You don't need a therapist's approval or a certificate to decide that a belief that's been sabotaging you for 20 years is no longer welcome. You just need to notice it clearly, name it honestly, and start acting as though the new belief is true before it fully feels true. Because feelings, again, are the last thing to catch up, not the first. Act like a person who believes effort pays off, even on the day it hasn't paid off yet. And eventually, the evidence accumulates until the new belief isn't an act anymore. It's just who you are. Here's a belief worth examining: that discipline is a cage and freedom is doing whatever you feel like in the moment. It's backwards. Look at who's actually free. The person with money in the bank and no debt breathing down their neck. The person whose body does what they ask of it. The person who can walk into a hard conversation without flinching. None of that is the fruit of low discipline. All of it is the fruit of high discipline, sustained over years most people never see. What feels like freedom in the moment. Skipping the workout, ignoring the budget, avoiding the conversation, isn't freedom. It's a loan. And loans come with interest. The people I talk to who are drowning in regret at 45 aren't paying with discipline anymore. They're paying with years. And years are the most expensive currency there is. Discipline costs you a Tuesday morning. Regret costs you a decade. I think about this every time I hear someone say they're too tired to do the thing that would actually change their life, but somehow never too tired to stay up scrolling until midnight. That's not a tiredness problem. That's a priorities problem wearing a tiredness costume. The body finds energy for what the mind has decided actually matters. Watch anyone who says they have no time for the gym suddenly find 2 free hours when their favorite show drops a new season. So what does actual discipline look like, practically? Not extreme, not dramatic, almost boringly small. 20 minutes of reading, 30 minutes of movement, 1 hard conversation you've been avoiding, 1 hour toward the skill that will actually change your income. That's it. 2 hours a day, most of it before anyone else is even awake. Run the math on that for 1 year. 30 plus books finished, nearly 200 hours of training, 365 hard things done instead of avoided. That person isn't the same person who started the year. They're not recognizable. Not because they did one impressive thing, because they did small, unimpressive things on repeat, long after it stopped feeling exciting. And that's exactly why most people quit. Not because it's hard, because it's boring. There's no applause for the 14th consecutive morning of getting up early. Nobody throws you a parade for reading page 40 of a book nobody else is reading. But that's precisely the part nobody talks about. The boring repetition is the whole mechanism. It's the compound interest of a life. If you've never let that sink in before, let it sink in now, because it changes how you look at every single ordinary day from here forward. There's a version of discipline people get wrong, too. and I want to correct it here. Discipline isn't about punishing yourself into submission. It's not white-knuckling your way through a life you hate. Real discipline, the kind that actually lasts, comes from deciding clearly what you want on the other side of the discomfort, and then treating the discomfort as the toll, not the punishment. You don't resent the toll booth on the way to somewhere you actually want to go. You just pay it and keep driving. There's another piece of this that almost nobody talks about, and it's your environment. Willpower is a limited resource, and most people burn theirs fighting an environment that's working directly against them. If the phone is on the nightstand, you will check it before your feet hit the floor. If the snacks are in the cabinet at eye level, you will eat them at 10 at night. Discipline isn't just about gritting your teeth. It's about being smart enough to remove the friction between you and the good choice and add friction between you and the bad one. Put the phone in another room. Put the running shoes by the door the night before. Make the good choice the easy choice, and you won't need nearly as much willpower to make it. If this is landing, do me a favor and hit like, and send it to someone who needs to hear it as much as you did. Because this is the kind of thing that's better tackled with someone in your corner, not alone. There's a word that has quietly stolen more dreams than any recession, any bad boss, any unfair break ever has. The word is later. Later I'll start the business. Later I'll fix my health. Later I'll have that conversation. Later I'll go back and finish what I started. Here's what later actually does. It doesn't disappear your dream. It just lets it expire quietly, without a funeral. You wake up one day at 50 and realize later became never, and nobody ever announced the moment it happened. There's no dramatic scene where the dream dies. It just fades, one postponed Monday at a time, until one day you stop mentioning it altogether, and everyone around you quietly stops asking about it too, because they've noticed you stop believing it yourself. Run your own numbers. If you're 30 and you live to 90, you have 60 years left, which sounds enormous, until you remember that's only double what you've already lived. And if the last 30 years were spent waiting for the right moment, why would the next 30 be any different, unless something in the philosophy actually changes? Readiness is a feeling. It is not a condition you're waiting to arrive at. The condition, the only one that has ever existed, is now. Feelings don't come before action and grant you permission to start. They follow action. You don't feel motivated and then go for the run. You go for the run, uncomfortable and unmotivated, and the feeling shows up somewhere around minute 10. Every person waiting to feel ready before they start has the mechanism backwards, and it's costing them years they will never get refunded. Think about the last big decision you postponed because the timing wasn't right. Be honest with yourself. Was the timing actually wrong, or were you? Timing is one of the most convenient excuses ever invented, because it sounds wise and patient instead of what it usually is, which is fear wearing a business suit. There will never be a version of the timing that feels perfectly safe. The people who moved anyway simply decided the cost of staying still was higher than the risk of moving. I want to give you a tool for this, something practical you can use today. Whenever you catch yourself saying later, stop and ask one question. What would this cost me if I did it right now? Badly, imperfectly, today. Almost always, the honest answer is very little. A little embarrassment, a little discomfort. Compare that to the cost of later, which is measured in years, not minutes. And the math stops being close. There's a related trap worth naming here, and it's comparing your timeline to someone else's. You see someone your age who's further along, and instead of it inspiring you, it convinces you that you've already missed your window. But you have no idea what field that person has been planting in for the last 10 years while you were planting in a different one, or not planting at all. Comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 15 isn't information. It's just a very efficient way to talk yourself out of starting. The only fair comparison that exists is between the person you were last year and the person you are choosing to build this year. Somewhere along the way, most people started treating failure like a permanent identity instead of a temporary season. One setback, one loss, one plan that collapsed, and suddenly it's, I guess I'm just not meant for this. But winter comes every single year, and farmers don't quit farming because of it. They understand that winter is not a rejection of their effort. It's a phase that demands a different kind of work. Preparing. repairing tools, studying what went wrong, getting ready for the thaw. The people who end up with the biggest harvests aren't the ones who never hit winter. They're the ones who kept working through it, while everyone else waited for spring to rescue them. I've noticed something interesting about people who eventually build something real. They don't actually have fewer failures than everyone else. They just interpret those failures differently. A setback for them is information, not identity. It's data about what didn't work, filed away, so the next attempt is smarter. Meanwhile, the person who quits after one failure treats it as a final verdict handed down by the universe, when it was really just one data point in an experiment they abandoned too early to see through. Here's the belief shift that actually matters. You can't change the economy, the past, or other people. You were never going to win that fight. But you were never supposed to fight that one. The only front you've ever actually controlled is you. And that's not a smaller task. It's the entire task. The moment you stop outsourcing responsibility for your results, you get the power back. Not later. The moment you decide it. I talk to people who are broke, and they tell me the system is rigged. Maybe it is, but they're still broke. I talk to people who are unhealthy, and they tell me the food industry is corrupt. Maybe it is, but they're still unhealthy. Somewhere between the problem being real and the problem being permanent, there's a decision point. And that decision point is the only one that has ever mattered. External things can be true and still not be the reason you're stuck. I want you to notice something about identity while we're here, because it changes everything downstream. Identity isn't a fixed thing you were handed. It's the running total of what you actually do, especially when nobody's grading you for it. Hit snooze once, nothing happens. Hit snooze for a year and you've quietly voted yourself into being someone who doesn't keep promises to himself. Same math in the other direction. Get up once, nothing happens. Get up for a year, and you've built a person who does hard things on schedule. And that person gets a completely different decade than the one who didn't. This is the part most people skip past too quickly, so I want to slow down here. You are not one dramatic decision away from a new life. You are thousands of small, boring decisions away from it. And the good news buried in that fact is that you get to start casting those votes again literally tomorrow morning. The election for who you're becoming is never actually over. It's just held daily. And most people simply stop showing up to vote for themselves. One more thing worth preparing you for, because nobody warns you about it. When you actually start changing, not everyone around you is going to celebrate it the way you'd expect. Some people got comfortable with the old version of you, the one who complained alongside them, who stayed up late doing nothing productive, who never made them feel like they should be doing more with their own life. When you start showing up differently, it can quietly unsettle people, even people who love you, because your growth becomes a mirror they didn't ask to look into. That's not a reason to stop. It's just something to expect, so it doesn't blindside you and talk you out of the very change you set out to make. There's a concept worth understanding deeply here, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Small actions don't add up in a straight line. They compound. A straight line means if you do one push-up today, tomorrow you're at 2. Compounding means something different. It means the small thing you did today makes the version of you doing it tomorrow slightly stronger, slightly more capable, slightly more likely to keep going. And that stacks. This is why the first 30 days of any real change feel almost pointless. You get up early for 2 weeks and you look basically the same. You read for 20 minutes a day for a month and you don't feel like a different person yet. This is the exact point where almost everyone quits, right before the curve starts to bend upward, because from the inside, consistent effort looks flat for far longer than it feels like it should. Think about ice on a lake. It gets 1 degree warmer, then another, then another. For a long stretch, nothing visibly changes. The ice looks exactly the same at 33 degrees as it did at 28. Then it hits 33 degrees and 1 more degree, and suddenly the whole lake is water. The final degree didn't do more work than any of the others. It just happened to be the one that showed. Most people quit somewhere around degree 29, convinced nothing is working, right before the visible part was about to begin. This is why philosophy matters more than motivation. Motivation is loud and temporary. It shows up after a good podcast and disappears by Wednesday. Philosophy is quiet and permanent. It's the belief that the invisible work is actually working, even when there's no proof yet. And that belief is what keeps you showing up on the days when nothing seems to be happening. The people who build real lives aren't the ones who feel motivated more often. They're the ones who kept planting through every single degree where nothing visible was happening yet. I'd ask you to think back on your own life for a second. Is there something you started and stopped right before it might have started paying off? Most of us have at least one. Not because the plan was wrong, because the timeline was longer than the patience. This is exactly why tracking matters more than feeling. Feelings are unreliable narrators during the invisible phase. They'll tell you nothing is working long before. That's actually true. But a simple record doesn't lie. A checkbox on a calendar. A note of what you read. A log of what you lifted. When the motivation dips, and it will, the record becomes the thing you lean on instead of the mood you're in that day. You stop asking, do I feel like continuing, and start asking, what does the evidence say? And the evidence, if you've actually been showing up, will always be more encouraging than the feeling. And when you do finally see the shift, the moment someone asks what's different about you, the moment a task that used to intimidate you barely registers anymore, don't let yourself dismiss it as luck or as something that was inevitable. Name it accurately. That's the version of you that showed up on ordinary Tuesdays with nothing to show for it yet and kept going anyway. That's not luck. That's the harvest arriving exactly on schedule for seeds that were planted a long time before anyone was watching. Here's the practice, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. Every morning, wake up 30 minutes earlier than you currently do. Sit in silence for 10 minutes. No phone, no noise. Just you and one honest question. Who do I need to become today to move toward the life I actually want? Then spend 20 minutes on one thing that builds you. Reading, moving, learning, or having the conversation you've been avoiding. That's the entire practice. 30 minutes. It won't feel like much on day one, and it isn't supposed to. It compounds the way every real thing compounds. Invisibly, then suddenly. After 30 days, you'll notice a shift. After 90, other people will notice it too. After a year, you won't recognize the person staring back in the mirror. And this time, that's a compliment. The version of you that's been making excuses, waiting for perfect conditions, blaming everyone but the mirror, that version was never permanent. It was a choice, repeated enough times that it started to feel like a personality. And choices can be unmade, not with anger at who you've been, with clear intention about who you're building next. So here's the only real question left. Are you going to close this out and let today be identical to yesterday? Or are you going to let this be the day the old version quietly ends and a stronger one starts getting built? 30 unglamorous minutes at a time? You don't need permission for this. You don't need a perfect plan, a clean slate, or a Monday to make it official. You need one decision, made honestly, and then repeated tomorrow, and the day after that, on the days it feels good, and especially on the days it doesn't. That's the whole method. Not complicated. Just consistent, for longer than feels reasonable, until the results stop being deniable even to you. If this gave you something real to work with, subscribe and stay with me. This channel exists to help you build that person, one ordinary morning at a time. And I'd rather do it with you than for an empty room.